Welcome to Say It Now for Tobin Brothers. Our special guest is a man who, we're at Moonee Valley, and this is in fact his workplace. Say It Now for this year. Matt Hill, thanks for joining us.
Craig, lovely to be here and part of the Say It Now campaign. Moonee Valley, I mean, it is my workplace, but it is a special place to walk into. Any racecourse is a special place to walk into, and there is something quite peaceful about a racecourse when there's nobody here or no racehorses here, and you can't help but just walk in and think about the great racehorses, the great races that have been down this straight behind us. Bone Crusher, our Waverley Star.
4 Winks victories, you think about it.
The 4 Winks races were extraordinary.
History.
Makybe Divas, Cox Plate, all the best horses win here. In fact, racing people would agree if you were to run Australia's best race now, Australia's best race, and start on a brand new canvas, you'd never run it at Moonee Valley. And that's the unique thing about a Cox Plate, is that it is quite a unique race course, a smaller race course, a tight race course, but the best horse always wins.
Tell me about who influenced Matt Hill when you were a young kid. Were you chasing paddle pop sticks down a drain like one of your mentors in John Tapp, or was it watching the races with the sound off and calling the race in your lounge room?
Well, when Tappy talks about the paddle pop sticks, I'm very much in the same boat. I used to get pencils end to end and put them around the lounge room, drove my mum nuts, and I tried to make it look like Flemington Racecourse, so I'd have the hallway as the straight six, and the 1400 metre start was under the telephone, which drove mum absolutely nuts, and I had the little toy horses going around, and had a vivid imagination listening to people like John Tapp, Greg Miles and Brian Martin. If it wasn't for these people, and back when I was a young lad, there wasn't a lot of horse racing on TV. It was predominantly radio, so it was about your imagination. And I had little rulers they were the semaphore boards because they had numbers on it, and a little picture frame was the winning post. And so for me, it was listening to horse racing and listening to the words and the theatre that came out of these guys' mouths. And to me, that was just what really set it apart for me to want to do as a living. And I became obsessed, really. I sat in the box with Greg Miles, who was a real hero of mine. I used to go to the races and hear him. And every time he said something, the crowd would react. And his voice would just boom through the speakers. And I'm thinking, geez, that'd be a great job. And that's what really spurred me on, and it became a vocation.
You mentioned your mum. You drove her mad, but she drove you mad. She drove you all over the place.
Yes, well, what I would do, I reckon the hardest gig I've ever gotten, between things like Olympics and Melbourne Cups and AFL football, whatever I've done, the hardest gig I ever got was my first one, because you have no experience. So I would get the little racing calendar out and ring race clubs wherever they were. It might have been Merton or Mansfield or Pooncarie or wherever, King Island. And I'd say, do you want a race caller? As a 15-year-old, I had a little chipmunk voice. And they'd say, yes, would you like to call a race? And I'd literally go up to mum and say, where's Matoa, mum? Can you drive me there on Saturday? You know, and most of the time, God bless her, she'd say yes, you know, and she'd pack me and my grandparents in the back of the Toyota Corolla, and off we'd go for an excursion on a Saturday or a Sunday, you know. And there were so many times we at St Arnaud, or all these places that we went to, and they were great country days. And in the end, my family was a bigger part of my career than I was. They were a part of it. It was our weekly excursion to a bush racetrack somewhere, be it a greyhound track or a thoroughbred track. So mum looks at me now and thinks it was all really worth it, and without her I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
You often hear people in this role, and I'm in the same boat, that when you're appearing before a huge crowd, and you do every time you call a race, you're actually only talking to one person. Is it still your mum?
Yes, I always call the Melbourne Cup to mum, because if I was to sit there on Melbourne Cup Day or Cox Plate Day and think about who I'm calling to, I don't think you'd be able to do it. I honestly don't think, if someone says to me, oh, there's 20 million people listening to the Melbourne Cup, I don't think I'd be able to do it. But also, one of the great race callers, if not the greatest in Australia and possibly the world, Bill Collins, always said, you call a race as if you're calling to a blind man. And all of us since Bill Collins, who called the greatest race at this place, one of the greatest race calls of Bone Crusher and our Waverley Star, we're all subjects of Bill Collins. And I imagine mum driving over the Westgate Bridge on a Melbourne Cup Day, and I'm describing the race to her. and that sort of makes me relaxed, but also gives me the indication of what my job is on Melbourne Cup Day, and it works.
You talk about the great race callers, and Bill Collins, of course, Brian Barton, Greg Miles, Johnny Tapp, and the list goes on.
Yes.
You're right up there amongst all those. But what about the versatility now that we see Matt Hill involved in? You've been calling the tennis, you've just been over in Austria looking at a ski race, which you called for the Winter Olympics. Bruce McAvaney must have had some influence on a young Matt Hill.
And I think he had an influence on a lot of us. And I'm not sure to this day if Bruce realises that or not. I'm sure he does, but we all wanted to be Bruce McAvaney. But we all wanted to be Bruce McAvaney for the versatility, but also the theatre and the passion he brings to sport, but also because he's just a hell of a nice man and so supportive of his younger colleagues. I don't think any of us will ever thank him enough for that. You'll never meet a more encouraging person. And as you know, you've been in media a long time, Craig. A lot of people in media, they're not that supportive of younger people because they're threatened or they're insecure. I think a lot of media people are deeply insecure, but you never get that with Bruce McAvaney, and you almost walk away after a 5-minute conversation with him and think you can take the world on, and a lot of us try to. So we can't thank him enough.
You summed him up beautifully. You went to Beijing, we nearly lost you. You got terribly ill over there. You were taken, I think, to Hong Kong, recuperated, came back, and you're back in town. You've been for some time. Well, I'm glad to report. Did that change your life? Did it make you look at other things, a different sort of perspective on things?
I'm sure anyone who's gone through some sort of trauma or dramatic event would agree that as the years go on, you tend to not think too deeply about it. But that was quite a long time ago now. It was 15 years ago, and you probably think about it every day. For me, what it changed was that you have to live, and it's so cliched and people say it, but none of us believe it, that you have to live every day as it comes. And bad memories fade, good memories fade.
And a lot of things don't matter anymore.
That's correct. That's correct. And to be honest, when you think deeply about it, does the past exist? The past is what we think it is. So for me, it taught me to enjoy every day now and take in the good things, but that won't last forever either. And if something bad happens, that won't last forever either. That's how I've taken it. And as you say, if you don't put the bins out on a Thursday night, it doesn't really matter. When you're 27 and mortality is all of a sudden a part of your thoughts, you do realise that you've got the best years ahead of you. Live them whilst you can, because you just don't know when they're going to disappear. Okay,
you talked about your mum, the Corolla, driving you up to Pooncarie and places like that. She's sitting right here. She's sitting right here, Matt. Talk to your mum.
Well, Susan Hill, my beautiful mum, who still lives around the corner from me, and I don't visit you enough. She'd say that, not me. Thank you so very, very much. I love you to tears, but that Toyota Corolla, I'm not sure who worked harder, it or us, to get me to where I am. But I think about it every day when I'm at the races, and I'm more than honoured and privileged to say it now. Thank you very much and love you a lot.